My name is Claire Evans, 17 years old. It started the way a lot of stupid stories start. In a classroom where the clock moved like syrup and someone decided I was the only thing worth watching. Dmitry Volkov sat 2 rows behind me in AP US history, quiet in those oversized sweaters that never seemed to fit the same way twice. Hair always a little damp, like he'd raced in from weather only he could see. He saved me a seat I never asked for, handed me notes I didn't need, and volunteered to be my partner, even when Mr. Larkin hadn't assigned partners. My friends called it adorable. I called it ignorable. When he hovered by our lunch table, Quinn would lean and whisper, "Your stalker has clocked in." And I'd laugh, because laughing made it small, manageable, a joke you could pocket and forget. The first red flag came covered in glitter. Prom season, and Dmitri rounded the corner by my locker with a poster board galaxy of hearts and our names in calligraphy. He held it like a newborn. "Go with me," he said, soft but certain, as if my yes already existed, and I just had to retrieve it. I put on my kind voice, the one you use for lost dogs and fragile egos, and said, "That's really thoughtful, but I'm already going with someone." I wasn't. I just didn't want to explain social gravity to a boy who refused to believe in it. Something shuddered behind his glasses. "But we're perfect for each other," he said. "I know everything about you." It should have chilled me more than it did. I told myself teenage boys are dramatic, and the moment dissolved into the hallway noise like paper in rain. After that, the pattern changed. He began appearing wherever I was with the convenience of a bad song on every radio. Library stacks, the coffee shop off Maple where the barista spelled my name wrong on purpose, the bookstore where I shelved paperbacks for $8 an hour. If I turned, he turned. If I paused, he suddenly needed to browse whatever section I stood in. Once I caught him looking through the fiction aisles with the concentration of a surgeon. He ducked, smiled through embarrassment, and pretended to be fascinated by Steinbeck. He's harmless, I told myself. And then I told Quinn, and then I told the version of me that didn't like sleeping with the blinds open. Harmless is such a kind word for a shadow that learns your timing. Still, graduation arrived like a door I could close. Caps in the air, the baseline of pomp and circumstance trying to convince us we were free. Dmitri shook my hand in a corridor of bodies and said, too steadily, "You'll forget all of this, but I won't." I laughed again. The reflex was a habit by then. I hugged people who had never learned my middle name and thought, 3 states away, new campus, new friends, a timetable that doesn't include him. Orientation week felt like rinsing my lungs. My roommate Zara moved like joy personified. Bang, she cut herself, rings on every finger, a laugh that bounced off cinder block like a dare to be happier. We made lists on sticky notes, thrift stores to raid, lecture halls to avoid, which dining hall salad bar wouldn't give you stomach regrets. I told her about Dmitri the way you tell a story you've survived, with a shrug at the end to prove it's over. She squinted, reading between my words the way she read margins in used books and underlined what mattered. "Creepy," she said, not unkindly, but past tense. That should have been the end of it. Instead, on Wednesday, I came back from a campus tour where upperclassmen swore the ugly building would grow on us and found an envelope slid under our door. My name sat on it in the careful calligraphy I didn't want to recognize. Inside, 3 pages. He'd transferred, he wrote, followed his heart to this university, and, wouldn't you know it, it just happened to be perfect for his goals. He listed my favorite cafe from back home, spelled right. He referenced my AP essay on Reconstruction, quoted a sentence I barely remembered writing. The postscript was the worst part, because it sounded like a promise and a threat held hands. When you care about someone, distance is just a math problem. Zara read it over my shoulder, her breath going flat. "This is creepy as hell," she said, each word landing like a thumbtack. "He transferred schools to follow you." "It's a coincidence," I lied, because lies are softer to hold. Lots of people come here. The next morning, he was outside my dorm, waiting with coffee and a croissant in a bag from the bakery on Elm, the one 6 hours away. He radiated relief, like I'd been lost, and he'd found me. "Surprise," he said. "Thought you'd want a taste of home." "How did you know where I lived?" I asked. I asked around, he said, as if information about me was a communal resource. People are helpful if you give them a reason. He started showing up where my feet were going before I knew they were going there. He joined the film club after I mentioned liking old movies. He put his name on the volunteer list for the literacy program that I'd signed 5 minutes earlier. He switched his major to English Lit when I announced mine at dinner, like an oath. In a campus of thousands, I was always running into him, and somehow he always had time to stay. When I softened my voice and said, "Dimitri, you need to give me some space," he smiled like I was performing a bit we'd rehearsed. "Of course," he said, and then he'd be across the quad at exactly the distance where you notice someone and can't claim they're standing near you. He learned the geography of boundaries the way other people learn languages, fluent in approaching without technically arriving. I tried to normalize it the way girls are taught to normalize so many things. Look for intent. Assume none of it is malicious. Be grateful that attention isn't angry. I told myself I was safe because the world was bright and busy and full of breath, because campus cops patrolled at night and RAs held meetings about consent and emergency blue lights, punctuated the dark like stars you could sprint toward. He pushed little details into conversation like proof of intimacy, how I chewed the end of a pen, that I skipped breakfast on Thursdays, that I wrote in the margins even when the book was a library copy. He said them almost tenderly, like compliments. "You notice everything," I said, and he beamed as if I'd finally named his gift. Across the room, Zara watched him with her chin in her hand, eyes cool as a thermometer. "People can be polite and dangerous at the same time," she said to me later. "You don't have to wait for fangs to call something a bite." I promised I'd talk to someone if it got worse, and then I didn't, because talking made it real, and real meant I'd been foolish not to see it sooner. Instead, I changed routes like a game, left 10 minutes earlier than I needed to, and then 10 minutes later, sat with my back to walls so I could watch doorways. I learned where the shadows fell in the library at different hours. I learned how to laugh with my mouth and not my eyes. The day the sky went from cornflower to bruised, a storm slid over the campus and pulled the light right out of the windows. I came back from a study session, shoes squeaking on tile, and almost tripped over a rectangle on the floor. Another envelope, the same careful lettering. I didn't pick it up right away. I listened. The hallway, some distant kettle, a door closing 2 floors down. Zara wasn't back yet. I stood in our doorway and felt my own pulse in my wrists. When I finally opened it, the first line was so bright it buzzed, "I told you distance was just math." The second line said he'd been waiting to see my face when I read this. The third told me he'd figured out our building's key code. The fourth was a list of the classes on my schedule. I read it twice, then a third time, and in that quiet, for the first time since I'd been laughing things off, I heard what my fear actually sounded like. Knuckles tapped the hall, lightly, polite. Not a threat, not yet. I looked through the peephole at a slice of sweater, a damp lock of hair, a smile refracted by a fisheye lens. He lifted his hand to knock again, then paused, as if remembering the script of a gentleman, and lowered it, waiting. "Claire?" His voice came soft through the door, careful, like he didn't want to wake anyone. "I thought we could talk." The envelope shook a little in my fingers. I didn't answer. He stayed a long time, long enough to make waiting into an instrument and play it until the notes hurt. When his footsteps finally moved down the hall, I slid the chain across the door, even though I knew it wouldn't change the code. I texted Zara, "He's here." Then I sat on the floor with my back against the wood, letter open in my lap, like evidence I'd just remembered to collect. Harmless is often just danger that hasn't raised its voice yet. Outside, somewhere between thunder and the scrape of a shoe, I heard him say something too low to carry. Later, I would tell myself I imagined it, because believing it was real made it worse. But in the moment, it felt like a thread thrown under the door and tied around my ankle. I'll always find a way to stay close. I used to think fear would announce itself loudly, that it would come with screaming, shattered glass, something cinematic. But real fear moves quietly. It slips under doors and envelopes you almost step on. The morning after that knock, I carried the letter to campus security. Officer Patricia Romero was in her 50s, with a calm, motherly voice that could probably talk a riot into taking turns. I laid the envelope on her desk like an offering. "He transferred here," I said. "He knows my class schedule, my dorm code. He waits outside my door." She read the letter, eyes moving without changing expression. "Did he threaten you?" "Not directly." Has he touched you, damaged property, sent explicit messages? No, he just knows everything. Patricia sighed, sliding the letter back. Miss Evans, this sounds like a misunderstanding. He's shy, socially awkward. A little clingy, maybe, but harmless. We get a lot of these. Harmless. That word again. It followed me like perfume I couldn't wash off. I don't feel safe, I said. I understand, she replied, handing me a pamphlet. Counseling Services, Managing Anxiety. By the time I left her office, I felt smaller than when I'd walked in. When I got back to the dorm, Zara was pacing. You went to security without me? I thought they'd take it seriously. She stared at me, waiting for the punchline. And? They didn't. She stopped pacing. Okay, then we do it ourselves. Locks, routines, everything. You're not walking anywhere alone again. It sounded dramatic, but I agreed. That weekend, we tested the new rule. Walk everywhere together. But fear makes you tired in small, invisible ways. On Sunday night, Zara had a paper due. I told her I'd be fine walking to the library alone. It was barely 2 blocks. She gave me that look, the one older sisters use in bad movies, and said, "Text me when you sit down." I never got the chance. The basement of the library was quiet enough to hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. I was halfway through my Shakespeare notes when I smelled the faintest trace of coffee, burnt and familiar. "Claire," he said. I froze. He sat down across from me like we'd planned to meet. His new look startled me. Contacts instead of glasses, hair trimmed, cleaner clothes. If you didn't know better, you'd think he belonged there. "Dimitri," I said carefully, "you need to leave." He smiled. "We need to talk. I've been watching, and Trevor isn't right for you." "Trevor?" I repeated. "We're not even— Wait, how do you— "I see everything," he said. "Where you eat, where you study, where you live. I know your schedule better than you do." My mouth went dry. "That's not romantic. That's— devotion," he said softly. I pushed back my chair, fast enough for it to fall. The sound cracked through the silence. His smile didn't move. "Stay away from me," I said. He tilted his head. "Or what? You'll tell campus security that I talked to you?" He was right. He hadn't done anything illegal, just enough to make my skin feel too small for my body. I grabbed my books and ran. Behind me, his voice floated through the basement like fog. "I'll be here when you're ready to talk." That night, I told Trevor everything. He listened with clenched fists. "This guy's been stalking you for months," he said. "And you laughed it off?" I didn't think— That's the problem. He paced the room, anger and fear braided together. "Promise me you won't go anywhere alone." I promised. For the next 2 weeks, Trevor or Zara walked with me everywhere. I changed routes, avoided the basement, and deleted my public social media posts. For a while, it worked. Until the gifts started. At first, they were almost sweet. A bookmark with my initials, left on my desk after class. A packet of my favorite tea. But then came the USB drive, slipped under my door. Inside were hundreds of photos of me. At the library, the quad, the cafe. Some from high school, some I didn't even know existed. That night I stopped laughing for good. I brought the USB to Officer Romero. She looked less calm this time, more inconvenienced. "I'll talk to him again," she said. The next day, Dimitri passed me on the quad, smiling. "Productive meeting," he said cheerfully. "Officer Romero thinks we just need to communicate better." My stomach turned. That evening, Romero called me in again. "He seems like a nice young man," she said. "A little shy, maybe misunderstood. You might have misinterpreted his friendliness." I stared at her. He followed me across states. "He transferred," she corrected gently. "Coincidence happens." She handed me another pamphlet. "Student Support. Coping with Misunderstandings." When I left, I realized she believed him more than she believed me. Spring semester crawled by. Finals, packing, home. I thought 3 months away would dissolve whatever obsession he had. It didn't. The first letter came 2 weeks into summer, the second 4 days later. Each one was longer, more detailed. His words started affectionate. "I miss our talks, our energy," then turned possessive. "You belong with me. They'll never understand us." The final one was 3 pages of fantasy, a timeline of our relationship, dating back to junior year. He'd rewritten our history into something that never existed. I kept every letter, photographed them, created a file. If no one would take me seriously, I'd make sure the evidence did. When I returned for sophomore year, I asked to switch dorms. Housing said no. They moved me 1 floor down instead. It was barely an improvement, because on move-in day, Dimitri was waiting. He looked different, stronger, sharper, contacts instead of glasses, designer sneakers instead of worn-out shoes. His smile had confidence now, not nervousness. "You look beautiful," he said. "I missed you." "Move," I said, trying to step past him. "I know you got my letters," he said. "We need to discuss them." "There's nothing to discuss." He took a step closer. "I think there is." That's when Trevor appeared behind him, voice like a warning shot. "Problem here?" Dimitri's smile didn't falter. "No problem. Just catching up." "She doesn't look like she wants to." "This doesn't concern you," Dimitri said, his tone suddenly hard. "Actually, it does." For a second I thought they'd fight. Then Dimitri backed away, hands raised. "Another time," he said, looking directly at me, "when you're alone." That night, another letter appeared under my door. Short, angry. "You've turned people against me. He's poisoning you. I'll fix this permanently." The next morning, I took it straight to Officer Romero. She frowned. This could be interpreted as a threat. "It is a threat," I said. "I'll bring him in again," she promised. A formal warning this time. When he left her office later that day, his smile was gone. The mask had finally cracked. For 3 weeks, he kept his distance. Physically, at least. But every day I saw him. Cafeteria corners, hallways, library entrances, always in sight, never close enough to accuse. He was careful, smart, too smart. And then Trevor got jumped. 3 men in hoodies. No robbery, no motive except malice. He spent 2 nights in the hospital with broken ribs. When he could talk again, he said, "One of them called me Trevor the hero." My blood ran cold. We both knew who was behind it. But Dimitri had an alibi. He'd even posted a group selfie during the attack. Time-stamped. Perfectly timed. When I confronted him in the cafeteria, he smiled like a host greeting a guest. Terrible what happened to Trevor. Random violence is senseless. "You did this." He showed me the photo on his phone. "I was studying. Ask anyone. But you're right to be concerned about his safety." He paused, eyes narrowing. Maybe he should be more careful about who he protects. I didn't reply. I just left. But his words followed me all the way home. That night, I stared at my reflection in the dark dorm window and realized something terrifying. Dimitri wasn't playing a game anymore. He was winning it, and I didn't know how to stop him. The night Trevor came home from the hospital, his ribs wrapped and his spirit cracked, I sat beside his bed trying to decide whether guilt or fury felt worse. He wouldn't look at me. "You can't fix this," he said quietly. "You can't make him stop." "I can try." He shook his head. "That's the problem, Claire. You keep trying like this is something you can reason your way out of." His words hit harder than the truth I'd been avoiding. Dimitri wasn't confused. He was deliberate. He knew exactly how far he could go without crossing a line the law could see. For a few weeks, I lived in fragments. Class, library, dorm, always scanning corners before turning them. Dimitri had stopped speaking to me directly, but I felt him everywhere. In the cafeteria, he'd sit 2 tables away, pretending to read. At night, I'd hear the faint buzz of my phone, open it to find blank messages from hidden numbers. Silence sent like a weapon. Zara tried to ground me with logic. "If he's violating the restraining order, we can nail him." "He's not violating it," I said, voice thin. "He's orbiting it." He had become an expert in distance. 100 yards away when I left class. 100 yards away when I got coffee. 100 yards away when I sat by the lake, pretending I could still breathe without fear. That precision was its own kind of cruelty. Dad drove up one Friday unannounced. He walked into my dorm room, looked at the locked windows, the tired lines under my eyes, and said, "Where's this kid?" "I don't know." "I'll find him." "Dad, please, he's calculated. You won't—" He slammed his fist against the desk, rattling the lamp. "Calculated doesn't mean untouchable." Mom called that night. Her voice was calm, but her words sharp. "We're getting you a lawyer." That was how Helena Vargas entered the story. Sharp suits, sharper eyes. She specialized in cases like mine, though she called them by gentler names. Persistent harassment, emotional coercion, stalking. She flipped through the letters, photos, and notes I'd collected like she was reading blueprints of a crime scene. "This isn't infatuation," she said. "This is architecture." "Of what?" "Control." We filed for a temporary restraining order that Friday. Dimitri was served the following Monday. For the first 48 hours, I felt a strange, weightless relief, like maybe the ground had been returned to me. Then, Wednesday morning, I saw him again. He stood outside the Humanities building, exactly 105 yards away, hands in his pockets, smiling. He didn't move toward me. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. It was theater, precision choreography. The smile said, "I'm obeying the law, and you still can't stop me." I called Officer Romero immediately. She came, measured the distance, then said, He's technically compliant. Technically compliant. That night, I stopped sleeping. The harassment evolved into something more sophisticated. Flowers delivered to my dorm from an admirer. Notes mailed to my parents' address, not to me. Each one signed simply, D. He sent one to my father that read, "She's too fragile to understand how much I care. You should be proud someone loves her enough to keep her safe." Dad nearly drove to campus again. Mom intercepted the keys. Helena warned me. He's building a narrative, making himself look like the victim if this ever reaches court. He's winning, I said. No, he's escalating, and escalation means mistakes. A week later, the mistake came. It was a Thursday. I had stayed late in the ceramics studio, one of the few places I still felt like a person instead of a target. The building was nearly empty, the kind of quiet where your own breathing sounds suspicious. I was cleaning brushes when the door creaked. Footsteps, then a voice. Working late again? I dropped the brush. The handle clattered against the tile. He was standing in the doorway wearing a suit like he'd come from somewhere important. He held something behind his back. You're violating the restraining order, I said. He smiled. Actually, I'm not. I'm auditing an art class. Legitimate educational purpose. My phone was on the table 3 feet away. He was between me and it. He brought the hidden object forward. Roses. A dozen of them. Their scent sharp and wrong in the air. I brought these as an apology for all the misunderstandings. Get out. I just want to talk. Now. He stepped closer, measured, deliberate. You've never actually said it, he murmured. Not once. Say it now. Look at me and tell me you don't want me. I don't want you in my life, I said. I want you gone. His expression softened, almost pitying. I don't believe you. He moved closer again. I backed toward the work table, my fingers brushing over the tools scattered there. The wooden carving knife felt small but solid in my hand. Stay back, I warned. You're not going to hurt me, he said confidently. You're not violent. I know you. You don't know anything. I know you prefer tea to coffee. I know you bite your lip when you're nervous. I know you... Stop! He smiled. Same physiological response. Fear or attraction. Either way, you're mine. He reached for me. His hand moved too fast. I swung the tool, slicing air, not him. His hand clamped around my wrist. Iron disguised as flesh. Let go, I gasped. Don't fight me, he whispered, leaning close enough for me to smell the roses and something chemical underneath. Sweet, dizzying. Then everything blurred. When I woke, my mouth was dry and my wrists were screaming. The air smelled like dust and paint. My head pounded in time with my heartbeat. I wasn't in the studio anymore. Ropes, no, zip ties, around my wrists and ankles. Concrete walls. Boxes stacked to the ceiling. A faint window high above me, gray light filtering in. Good, his voice said somewhere across the room. You're awake. I turned my head and saw him sitting on a chair, calm, composed, the same impossible patience in his posture. Where are we? I asked, my voice rough. Somewhere safe, he said, where we can finally talk without interruption. He smiled like he was welcoming me home. And that's when it hit me. The invisible line had finally been crossed. It wasn't obsession anymore. It was ownership. When you wake up bound, the world rearranges itself. Everything you thought was solid, law, safety, reason, melts into something soft and unreliable. My wrists were zip-tied behind me, my ankles too. My head throbbed, my tongue heavy from whatever he'd used. The light in the small window above me was gray, the kind of color that comes right before dawn or right before a storm. He sat in a chair a few feet away, calm as a host waiting for his guest to settle in. You were out for a while, he said. I was worried. Where are we? I asked, voice barely a rasp. Somewhere safe, somewhere we can start over. He said it like a confession, like this was love and not a crime. The room was concrete, windowless, except for that narrow slit of sky. Stacks of boxes lined the walls, neatly labeled with black marker. Photos, notes, letters, plans. A single fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead. There was a mattress, a folding chair, a table, and him. Every instinct screamed, stay calm. How long have I been here? Not long, he said. 6 hours, maybe. I didn't want you to wake up frightened. The irony almost made me laugh. He stood, moving closer, but keeping distance like he'd practiced the choreography of menace. You've been poisoned against me, he said. By Trevor, by your roommate, by everyone, but none of them know you the way I do. I know exactly who you are, I said. A criminal. His smile didn't move. A lover. He crouched beside the mattress. I'm going to untie you soon, but you need to understand something. We can't go back to how things were. The world out there doesn't make sense for us. Too many lies, too many rules. Here we can finally be honest. Honest, I said, you kidnapped me. I rescued you. I turned my head away, forcing my breathing to stay even. If he thought I was panicking, he'd feed on it. He leaned in, voice softer now. I know what you're thinking, that you can scream or run, but you don't need to. I'm not your enemy. I just want you to listen. He reached behind me, the plastic ties snapping loose one by one. Needles of blood rushed into my hands. Better? He asked. I nodded. Good. Now start over. Tell me you see what I see. What do you see? He smiled again, eyes bright with something feverish. A connection that survived everything meant to destroy it. I said nothing. I was cataloging the room. Distance to the door, the angle of the chair, the shape of the vent above the boxes. My mind split in two. One part speaking, the other calculating. Talk to me, Claire, he said, almost pleading. You've never really looked at what we are. I forced my voice into something soft. Then show me. He hesitated, then nodded toward the boxes. Our history, everything that proves it. He brought the one labeled photos. Hundreds of pictures spilled out. Me at 16, at graduation, walking to class, asleep in my dorm bed. How did you take these? I watched over you, he said. Protected you. That's what love does. My stomach turned. At the bottom of the box, a photo froze me. A night parking lot. Trevor on the ground. 3 figures surrounding him. The image was grainy, but clear enough to know it wasn't random. You were there, I said. He didn't deny it. I had to make sure they didn't go too far. They? The men I hired, he said simply. They were supposed to scare him, not break him. I corrected the mistake. You paid to have him beaten, I whispered. I intervened. I made sure he lived. He said it with pride, as if mercy erased violence. You could have killed him. I would never kill for pleasure, he said. Only for necessity. I took a breath, steady and deliberate. Show me the rest. He blinked, surprised. You want to see? I need to understand, I said. If I understand, maybe I can stop fighting you. He smiled, that same dangerous relief he'd shown when I used to accept his help in high school. He went to another box marked Research. Inside were folders with my life reduced to data, medical records, class schedules, my parents' address, every password I'd ever used. How did you get these? He shrugged. I work in the registrar's office now. People trust me. Why me? I asked. Why, out of everyone, did you choose me? He looked honestly puzzled. Because you were kind once. You didn't laugh at me like the others. That moment in class, you dropped your pencil, and I picked it up, and you smiled. That was all it took. You saw me. I remembered that day. I'd smiled out of politeness, not prophecy. That wasn't a promise, I said. He shook his head. You just don't remember how it felt. He turned toward the door. I need to think, he said. Don't try anything foolish. When he left, the locks clanked like gunshots. I waited, counting breaths, 30 of them, then pushed myself to sit up. My hands trembled as I studied the walls. The vent above the boxes, wide enough to crawl through if I could reach it. I dragged his chair beneath it, climbed, tested the metal grate. It was loose. 4 screws, 1 water bottle cap, 10 slow minutes. When the last screw came free, I lifted the grate and hoisted myself into the vent, metal groaning under my weight. The air was sharp and cold. I crawled forward, knees burning, palms slick with sweat. Behind me, I heard a door open. Claire? I froze. Silence. Then, I like that you're curious, but you shouldn't test me. The sound of his footsteps drew closer. I pushed forward, faster. 20 feet. Another vent ahead, light leaking through. I kicked it once, twice, the grate fell. I dropped into another storage unit stacked with furniture. His voice echoed behind me. That was impressive, he said, somewhere down the corridor. I ran. The hallway stretched long and fluorescent. Rows of metal doors, each labeled in red numbers. Exit signs glowing green like salvation. I could hear him running now, too. Footsteps rhythmic, confident. The door at the end was heavy but unlocked. I shoved it open, bursting into the morning light. The sky was pale, washed with cloud. A chain-link fence surrounded the facility, but the main gate stood open. Claire! He shouted behind me. I sprinted toward the gate, lungs burning. I could see the main road ahead, traffic in the distance. I could taste freedom. He caught my arm just as I reached the fence. Enough, he hissed. You've had your fun. Now we go back. Help! I screamed toward the street. Somebody help! His grip tightened. No one can hear you. From here, we just look like a couple arguing. I looked up. Camera. Mounted on a pole near the office, red light blinking. recording. "The camera," I said, pointing. He followed my gaze, and for the first time, I saw fear in him. Real fear. A voice called from across the lot. "Everything okay out here?" A security guard was walking toward us. "She's fine," Dimitri said quickly. "My girlfriend's having an episode." "I'm not your girlfriend," I shouted. "He kidnapped me. Unit 247. He's been holding me." The guard's eyes widened. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch. Possible abduction." Dimitri's grip turned iron. "This isn't over," he said quietly. Then he let go and ran. I collapsed to my knees as the guard reached me, adrenaline shaking my bones. "He drugged me," I gasped. "There's evidence, photos, files." He kept one hand on my shoulder, the other on his radio. "Stay with me. Help's coming." Sirens rose in the distance, faint at first, then louder. For the first time in 2 years, I let myself cry. Not because I was weak, but because I was alive to do it. The sirens grew louder until they became everything. A flashing red storm that finally drowned him out. Police cars cut through the industrial fog as officers rushed in, weapons drawn. The storage unit door he'd used, Unit 247, was pried open within minutes. They found it exactly as I'd described. Stacks of labeled boxes. The mattress. The broken ties. My fingerprints on the chair and vent. His notes, neat as a scientist's journal, documenting every move I'd ever made. Detective Ray Martinez, tall, tired eyes, looked at me like I was both a survivor and a crime scene. "You did everything right," he said, kneeling beside where I sat wrapped in a blanket. "I almost didn't," I whispered. He nodded. "Most don't get away." I remember thinking that "get away" was such a small phrase for such a large miracle. In the next hours, the unit transformed into evidence. Crime scene photos, DNA samples, folders labeled Relocation Plan A, B, and C. Inside them were maps of remote cabins, fake IDs with both our faces, and a ledger of supplies he'd already bought, water filters, solar panels, prepaid phones. He'd planned everything down to the month. They even found a box marked contingency. Inside, tranquilizers, duct tape, zip ties. When Detective Martinez showed me the inventory list, I realized what contingency really meant. What he'd planned to do if I didn't become the version of me he wanted. "He was ready to vanish with you," Martinez said grimly. "We'll circulate his photo to every law enforcement database in the state." But he was gone, slipped into the woods before the first cruiser arrived. My parents reached the station that afternoon, pale and shaking. Mom's hands didn't stop trembling the entire time she held me. Dad kept repeating the same sentence over and over. I should have come sooner. There wasn't anything to say to that. For the next week, I lived in a kind of half-light. Interview after interview. Detectives, psychologists, FBI agents, everyone kind, professional, asking questions I couldn't always answer. "When did you first know he was dangerous? When did he drug you? Did he ever say what he planned to do next?" The truth was, the danger hadn't arrived all at once. It had leaked in through cracks I'd mistaken for kindness. The FBI's cyber team uncovered even more. He'd hacked my student accounts, accessed GPS data through a compromised study app, even placed a hidden camera in my dorm, one I'd never found. He'd watched me sleep. Every new discovery felt like losing something invisible. Privacy, memory, self. Agent Carlson explained it clinically. "He built a network around you, surveillance disguised as care." It was the perfect summary of what love had never been. They caught him 3 weeks later. He was hiding in his parents' basement 2 states away, sitting in front of 3 monitors, logged into my social media accounts. The FBI raided before sunrise. When they handcuffed him, he didn't fight. He just said, "Tell her I'm glad she's safe." It made the arresting officer's skin crawl. The trial took 8 months. Long enough for me to finish therapy sessions that blurred together like rain against glass. Long enough for him to send letters from jail that the prosecutors intercepted, each one beginning with, "You don't understand." His defense lawyer called him a confused young man whose affection escalated. Helena Vargas called him what he was, a predator who studied his victim until she stopped believing her own fear. When the jury filed in, Dimitri stood taller than I expected. He didn't look at anyone but me. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all charges: kidnapping, stalking, harassment, conspiracy to commit assault, and violation of a protective order. 12 years. 12 years for every night he'd made smaller. The sentencing hearing came with the strange calm of inevitability. When they invited me to give a statement, my knees shook. My voice didn't. You told me once that great love requires great sacrifice, I began. You were right, but the sacrifice wasn't supposed to be my freedom, or my safety, or my peace of mind. It was supposed to be your ego. He stared, unblinking. What you called love, I continued, was ownership. What you called devotion was control. You rearranged your life around me, then punished me for not calling that worship a gift. The courtroom was silent except for my voice. Real love isn't supposed to be terrifying. Real love doesn't keep score. Real love doesn't plan escape routes. Judge Albright sentenced him to the maximum penalty the state allowed. As they led him away, Dmitri turned once, the same faint smile on his lips. "This isn't over," he mouthed. A shiver ran through me, but I met his stare with something stronger than fear. "Yes, it is." I changed universities, changed my name. Finished my degree quietly, worked at a small consulting firm where no one knew about the headlines. Zara stayed my roommate through all of it. She's the only one who still knows where I live. Trevor and I never got back together, but he called after the sentencing. He'd started working with a victims' rights group. "You save someone else without knowing it," he said. Maybe he was right. Maybe that's the only kind of justice that matters. 5 years later, the world looks different. Different city, different job, different name, but some things don't change. I still check the locks twice every night. I still pause when someone says my name too loudly. I still dream of gray rooms with one window and the sound of footsteps approaching. And I still wonder if, in 7 years, when Dmitri becomes eligible for parole, he'll find me again. The police call him a criminal. The court called him dangerous. But to me, he's something worse. He's the reminder that harmless is just what evil looks like before it finds its courage. I end every day with the same routine. Lock the door, check the window, breathe. Some nights I tell myself I'm safe. Other nights I tell myself safety is just a pause between storms. But then morning comes, light through the curtains, the sound of the city waking up. And I remember that I'm still here. That's the ending he'll never own.